In this video, I'm going to look at the healthcare sector. I'm going to look at passive funds in terms of some ETFs, and I'm going to look at some active funds in terms of some investment trusts and some open-ended investment companies. And then at the end, I'll reveal a fund that I think is worthwhile further consideration in your portfolio. Why invest in healthcare? Well, it's got strong defensive qualities, including the fact that it's underwritten by things like private insurance and national health services in many countries. There's also growth opportunities from an aging population and new drug discoveries and the application of artificial intelligence to already existing drug processes and deliveries. So I think it's a good alternative to Apple/Microsoft, where these share prices might stall because the companies are fairly saturated in their markets. And basically for healthcare, the adjusted risk return is pretty good, and so that's why it's one of the top sectors to invest in. So here is some healthcare ETF data taken from the website justetf.com. The top performer over the last 5 years has been the US healthcare sector. However, that's been buoyed by a strong US dollar, which might unwind in the future. So possibly a better bet is more of a global healthcare ETF, and actually the risk-adjusted return here is better than that of the S&P 500 healthcare sector. And then down at the bottom, we've got the Nasdaq Biotechnology ETFs and a couple of thematic ETFs as well. So why has biotechnology underperformed? Well, it's been impacted by drug trials taking longer, possibly a greater percentage of drug trials failing, particularly amongst some of the smaller, more flaky companies. High interest rates don't help when a lot of your earnings are geared towards the long-term future, so there's kind of a risk-off appetite. But sector returns can be uncorrelated with the wider market, so we could see biotechnology rebound even if the wider market doesn't do so well. Here are the top 10 global healthcare companies. So the US is very dominant at 68%, then Switzerland, Denmark and the UK. The overall mix isn't too bad. It's got nearly 40% in the top 10, and United Health, which is a US healthcare provider, is the top holding at just over 6%. Now on to investment trusts looking at healthcare and biotechnology, taken from the Association of Investment Companies website. Here the top performer is Polar Capital Global Healthcare. The 5-year return is 68%, which is actually lower than the index, and on a discount of nearly 5%, I'm not really inclined to pay the fees for this investment trust. And then some of the worst performing investment trusts, we've got Syncona here, negative 30% over the last 5 years. So it shows that there can be a risk of investing in active funds. Polar Capital Global Healthcare is actually fairly similar to the global benchmark that it's aiming to beat, and you can see that from the top 10 here. There's one or two that are quite interesting, but overall, again, I'm not that excited. Next, I've looked at open-ended investment companies, and I've used the website Pick a Fund. The top one seems to be Schroeder Global Healthcare. Then we've got Polar Capital, Janus Henderson, AXA Framlington, and then right at the bottom, Fidelity. So if I pick the top one, which was Schroders, you can see there's amazing correlation between the fund and the overall index. And the thing was that back in 2014, you couldn't buy a global healthcare ETF, so you had to buy the active fund. But now you have got the ETFs around, there doesn't seem to be much reason to actually use an active fund. Moving on to biotechnology and the open-ended investment companies there, the standout performer is Polar Capital Biotechnology Fund. It's got quite a lot of assets behind it, and the 5-year CAGR is over 11% compared to nearly 8% for the nearest competitor. So this one's worth a further look. So Polar Capital has quite a lot of expertise in this area. It's quite well renowned. It's got a team of 8 specialists that work on this fund. They've got quite a lot of experience. The fund has around about 40 to 60 positions, and it does some fundamental analysis to drive its performance, and you can pause the video and read a bit about the investment philosophy. It's also very highly rated, Morningstar Gold, and it's won some other awards as well. The price performance of Polar Capital Biotechnology is very interesting because it's outperformed when the overall index has been positive, and then also it's had lower drawdowns when the index has been negative. So it's actually outperformed in every single year, which is pretty amazing, and there's not many funds that can actually say that. So looking at its holdings, some companies you would have heard of, like AstraZeneca, maybe Sanofi, others maybe less so. Fairly concentrated in the top 10 at 42%, and it's got some smaller cap holdings, 13% there, 63% exposure to the US. So it's reasonably well diversified, and it's quite an interesting portfolio. So my conclusion is that for healthcare, I would just go for an ETF tracker, but for biotechnology, could be a bit more interesting if that sector does come back into favour. And Polar Capital have some good expertise here. They've had some good performance in the past, so that one is well worth further consideration. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next week.